the most successful man in the academic world, could not get out of bed. Ghazali had reached the pinnacle of intellectual achievement by age 33. He was professor at Baghdad University, the Harvard of the medieval Islamic world. Students came from across continents to study with him, but he was so spiritually exhausted that his body began shutting down. He could barely speak in class. Food lost its taste. Sleep brought no rest. Here is what makes his story incredible. He discovered that his success was not just failing to make him happy. It was actively making him miserable. Modern psychology calls this the hedonic treadmill, and research shows it affects everyone who bases their happiness on external achievements. But Ghazali found something else, a completely different source of fulfillment that external circumstances cannot touch. Have you ever noticed how empty you feel right after achieving something big? That promotion you worked toward for months, the relationship you finally got, the recognition you craved. For a brief moment, you feel satisfied. But within days, maybe weeks, that feeling fades. You find yourself looking for the next achievement, the next goal, the next thing that will finally make you feel complete. This is not a personal failing. This is not weakness. This is one of the most well-documented phenomena in psychology. According to research published in academic studies, Ghazali experienced what modern scientists call hedonic adaptation. This is the tendency for humans to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness, despite positive or negative life events. You achieve something significant, feel good temporarily, then adapt to your new circumstances. What once brought you joy becomes your new normal, and you need something bigger to feel the same level of satisfaction. The hedonic treadmill was first documented in a famous 1978 study by researchers Brickman, Coates, and Janov Bowman. They found that lottery winners, within 18 months of their windfall, reported being no happier than people who had not won anything. The initial excitement wore off, and they returned to their previous emotional baseline. But here's the crucial insight. They did not just return to neutral. Many reported feeling less satisfied with everyday pleasures than they had before winning. Ghazali understood this pattern centuries before modern psychology had a name for it. According to research on his teachings, he observed that people who chase external validation become trapped in what he called a cycle of constant craving. You achieve one level of success, feel satisfied briefly, then immediately start wanting more. Your happiness becomes dependent on continuously acquiring new achievements, possessions, or recognition. Modern research confirms exactly what Ghazali observed. Studies show that people who base their well-being primarily on external factors report higher levels of anxiety, depression, and life dissatisfaction than those who have developed internal sources of fulfillment. They also tend to have more difficulty maintaining relationships because their self-worth fluctuates based on circumstances beyond their control. But Ghazali discovered something even more profound. External success does not just fail to provide lasting happiness. It actively undermines your ability to find satisfaction in simple pleasures. When your identity becomes tied to achievement, you lose the capacity to enjoy ordinary moments. A conversation with a friend, a quiet evening, a beautiful sunset. These experiences feel meaningless because they do not advance your status or feed your ego. According to academic research on his work, Ghazali described this as having eyes that have been so distracted by physical things and external validation that we lose the ability to see what truly matters. He said people become so focused on acquiring more that they forget how to appreciate what they already have. This phenomenon is supported by recent studies on what researchers call the hedonic adaptation prevention model. Developed by psychologists Sheldon and Lubomirsky, this model identifies two specific ways that positive life changes lose their emotional impact over time. First, the positive emotions generated by success simply fade as you get used to your new circumstances. Second, and more insidiously, Success raises your aspirations. What used to feel like enough no longer satisfies you. You want more, bigger, better. Research published in multiple academic journals shows that this adaptation process happens remarkably quickly. Within months of a major positive change, most people report feeling no happier than they did before the change occurred. But the desire for even greater achievements intensifies. This creates what researchers call the hedonic treadmill. You have to keep running faster and faster just to maintain the same level of satisfaction. Ghazali experienced this firsthand during his years as a professor. Despite having achieved everything an intellectual could dream of, he felt what he described as a knowing pain in the soul. He realized that his pursuit of academic recognition had created an insatiable hunger for more validation, more respect, more influence. But no amount of external achievement could fill what he recognized as essentially a spiritual emptiness. Modern neuroscience research helps explain why external success creates this cycle. When you achieve something you have been working toward, your brain releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. But dopamine is not actually about satisfaction. It is about wanting. It motivates you to seek more of whatever triggered its release. This is why achieving a goal often makes you want to set an even bigger goal rather than feeling content with what you have accomplished. Studies using brain imaging technology show that people who are highly focused on external achievements show different patterns of neural activity than those who find fulfillment through internal sources. Their brains are constantly scanning for the next opportunity to gain status, recognition, or material reward. This creates a state of chronic dissatisfaction because there is always something else to achieve, something else to acquire. But here is where Ghazali's insights become truly valuable. He did not just identify the problem of external dependence. He discovered that there is a completely different way to experience fulfillment. One that does not depend on circumstances, achievements, or other people's approval. According to research on his teachings, Ghazali realized that true happiness comes from what he called self-knowledge rather than external validation. This is not just knowing facts about yourself. It is recognizing that your sense of worth does not have to fluctuate based on your circumstances. You can develop an internal source of security that remains stable regardless of what happens in the external world. Modern positive psychology research supports exactly what Ghazali taught. Studies show that people who have developed what researchers call intrinsic motivation report higher levels of life satisfaction, better mental health, and more resilience in the face of challenges. Intrinsic motivation means doing things because they are inherently meaningful to you, not because they will bring external rewards. People with intrinsic motivation are driven by what psychologists identify as three core needs. Autonomy, which means feeling like you have choice and control over your actions. Competence, which means developing skills and capacities that feel meaningful to you. And relatedness, which means feeling connected to others and contributing to something larger than yourself. Research published in academic journals shows that when these intrinsic needs are met, people experience what scientists call eudaimonic well-being. This is happiness that comes from living in accordance with your deepest values rather than just pursuing pleasure or avoiding pain. People with high levels of eudaimonic well-being report feeling more energetic, more creative, and more resilient. They also show better physical health markers and stronger immune system functioning. Ghazali described this type of fulfillment as coming from recognizing your essential nature rather than trying to construct an identity through external achievements. Modern research confirms that people who understand their core values and live in alignment with them are much less susceptible to the hedonic treadmill. They can enjoy success when it comes, but their happiness does not depend on it. This does not mean that external achievements are meaningless or that you should not pursue goals. The research shows that the problem is not with success itself. but with making success your primary source of identity and self-worth. People who maintain intrinsic motivation can work toward external goals while remaining internally grounded. Studies on happiness and goal pursuit show that people who approach achievements as expressions of their values rather than attempts to prove their worth experience much more satisfaction from their successes. They also handle setbacks better because their core sense of self is not threatened when things do not go according to plan. Ghazali discovered this principle through what he described as a process of inner investigation. Instead of constantly looking outside himself for validation, he began paying attention to what brought him genuine satisfaction versus what only fed his ego. He noticed that activities aligned with his deeper purpose energized him, while activities focused on gaining approval drained him. Modern research on flow states supports Ghazali's observations. Flow is the psychological state where you become completely absorbed in an activity because it feels inherently rewarding. People in flow report feeling deeply fulfilled regardless of whether the activity brings external recognition. Studies show that people who regularly experience flow have higher baseline levels of happiness and are much less dependent on external validation. According to academic research on his work, Ghazali also understood that breaking free from external dependence requires what he called contemplation or reflection. This means regularly examining your motivations and asking yourself whether you are acting from authentic desire or from a need to prove yourself to others. This practice is supported by research on mindfulness and self-awareness. Studies show that people who regularly reflect on their values and motivations are better able to distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic goals. They make choices that align with their authentic interests rather than just pursuing what they think will impress others. But perhaps Ghazali's most important insight was recognizing that the transition from external to internal fulfillment requires patience with yourself. The pattern of seeking external validation often develops over many years. It takes time to build new sources of satisfaction and security. Research on behavior change confirms that developing intrinsic motivation is a gradual process. Studies show that people who try to completely eliminate external goals often struggle because they have not yet developed strong internal sources of fulfillment. The most successful approach involves gradually shifting the balance between external and internal motivation over time. So how do you actually make this transition in your daily life? Research suggests several specific strategies that can help you develop more intrinsic sources of satisfaction. First, pay attention to activities that energize you versus those that drain you. Activities that align with your intrinsic values typically leave you feeling more energetic even when they are challenging. Activities pursued primarily for external validation often leave you feeling depleted even when they are successful. Second, practice what researchers call values clarification. Spend time identifying what matters most to you, independent of what others expect or reward. Research shows that people who can clearly articulate their core values are much less susceptible to external pressure and more likely to experience lasting satisfaction. Third, cultivate what psychologists call self-compassion. This means treating yourself with the same kindness you would show a good friend, especially when you make mistakes or face setbacks. Research shows that self-compassionate people are more willing to take risks for intrinsic reasons because they are less afraid of failure. Fourth, develop practices that connect you to purposes larger than your individual success. This might involve contributing to your community, mentoring others, or engaging in creative work that expresses something meaningful to you. Studies consistently show that people who feel connected to larger purposes report higher levels of life satisfaction regardless of their personal achievements. Finally, practice gratitude for what you already have rather than constantly focusing on what you want to achieve next. Research shows that gratitude practices can help interrupt the hedonic treadmill by training your attention to appreciate present circumstances rather than always seeking more. What makes Ghazali's approach so powerful is that it offers a way to enjoy external success without being enslaved by it. When your core happiness comes from internal sources, achievements become bonuses rather than necessities. You can work toward goals with dedication while maintaining perspective about what really matters. The beauty of this approach is that it makes you more effective in the external world, not less. Research shows that people with strong intrinsic motivation are more creative, more resilient, and better at collaborating with others. They often achieve more external success than people who are desperately chasing validation because they can focus on the work itself rather than worrying about how it will be received. Ghazali's crisis taught him that no amount of external achievement can substitute for internal fulfillment. But it also revealed that internal fulfillment does not require giving up external goals. It requires changing your relationship to those goals so they serve your authentic development rather than just feeding your ego. Modern research confirms that this balance is not only possible, but essential for sustained happiness. People who base their identity entirely on external achievements inevitably experience the crashes that come with setbacks and the emptiness that comes with success. But people who develop internal sources of worth can weather both failure and success with greater equanimity. The next time you find yourself feeling empty after an achievement, remember Ghazali's discovery. The emptiness is not telling you to achieve more. It is pointing you toward a deeper source of satisfaction that no external circumstance can touch. Your dissatisfaction with surface-level success is actually the beginning of wisdom about what fulfillment really means.